Hello and welcome back. My name is Lexi Jong, and here I like to talk about luxury makeup. Today we are starting a new series, and this series is going to be focused on makeup brushes. And primarily I use Fude brushes, so those are going to be the ones that are featured most often, most frequently. However, I do also use synthetic brushes, so there will be some of those in these videos as well. And for today's video, we are going to start off with going over my favorite brushes for each makeup category. So I tried to narrow it down to, one or two brushes per category. It worked only okay. So when you're paying attention to these brushes and taking a look at them, a lot of times you may already have, if you don't have that same exact brush already, you may already have one that is very similar in shape and function and so forth. So really this is more about what shape and style I prefer for each of these categories versus necessarily the brand. And that's not true for necessarily every brush, but a lot of brushes, there are going to be multiple brushes that are the same shape and size, perhaps even the same bristle hair, but they're different brands. And in that case, they're pretty interchangeable. Now, before we get started on brushes, I just want to share with you where I purchase a lot of my brushes. And the Fude brushes, SUQQU, I usually purchase from Visage USA when they are doing a sale. And they run sales every few months. And I typically, their sales typically range. So, if you spend a certain amount, you get like 15% off or 20% off or whatever. So I typically build up an order to get to the 25% off, and then I purchase from the sale then, and they do SUQQU. So I usually buy SUQQU brushes there. They also offer engraving on their brushes, and then you can actually get, like, for example, this one here, I got my name engraved on it. It costs an extra $2, but for a brush that I find, it's like something really special that I wanted, I do usually opt for the engraving in that case. So the FO series brushes that I picked up, I got my name engraved on all of those. Other places to buy Fude brushes, you've got Fude Beauty and CD Japan. Those are both reputable places to buy Fude brushes as well. And some of these brands are now also starting to create Amazon stores. Now, I personally don't recommend buying things off of Amazon typically, just because you don't always know exactly where it's coming from or if it's legit. However, certain brands now have their own official store through Amazon. And if you're purchasing through that store, then I feel like it is legit. I haven't purchased it yet, but SUQQU, which is a brand, I don't have any of their brushes yet, but I really want to try them. They look kind of like the newest Wayne Goss brushes, I forget what they're called. Are they like the artistic brushes or something? Whatever they are with the wooden handle that look more like a paintbrush. That's what SUQQU brushes look like, and I really want to try some. SUQQU has just recently opened a store on Amazon, and if you purchase through their store, it's a great way to pick those up. I think Koyudo also has a store on Amazon as well now. In addition, a lot of brushes can also be found on Beautylish. Now, Beautylish doesn't always carry like the full lines. For example, they've got a lot of SUQQU brushes, but they won't necessarily have all of them. And there is a slight markup in the prices sometimes through Beautylish compared to some of the more direct retailers like Visage or Fude Beauty, just because you've got the convenience of already having it in the country and it can get to you much faster. When you order from some of the Fude companies like Visage USA or Fude Beauty or CD Japan, these items actually have to come from Japan. They can take like 6 weeks or so to arrive to you. So these newer forms of shopping options like Beautylish and purchasing through like some of these Amazon stores, you're able to get things a little bit faster, but there may be a price difference. As a matter of fact, all of the retailers I mentioned all have different prices on these brushes. So it's always best to compare before purchasing, unless you know for sure that you want to stick with a specific retailer. Some of the brushes that I am featuring today are only sold at Beautylish, such as SUQQU. SUQQU brushes, if I had to pick one brand overall as a favorite, it would probably be SUQQU because I find her brushes to be the most versatile and the most functional out of the ones that I have. So I have favorites from all different brands, but if I had to just pick one brand and only use that brand, I would go with Sonia G. Let's go ahead and start on my favorites. We're gonna start off with foundation brushes, and I picked 2 foundation brushes to be my favorites. So we've got the Koyudo Fu-Pa03 brush. This is synthetic, and unfortunately this brush has just recently been discontinued, so you can still find some of these out there. Beautylish has some right now in stock, but they won't be making more of these. They're changing their Fu-Pa line, and so there will be something similar, but it won't be exactly the same, supposedly. So I'm not really sure. I haven't seen the new ones yet. They might be out already though. What I love about this brush is it's synthetic bristles, which with cream foundations, and liquid foundations, I really do prefer using synthetic brushes because not only are they soft, but they still apply the foundation well, and you don't have to worry so much about the bristle hairs. When you get a liquid or cream product on natural hair bristles, if you don't clean it properly or you kind of let it sit, some people don't clean their foundation brushes every day. And with natural hair bristles, what can happen is you have that buildup of the liquid or cream product, and it hardens on that hair. And then when you go to either use it again or you go to wash it, that hard part can actually snap off, and it can break or damage the hair as well. And so that's one of the reasons I really do tend to use more synthetic brushes for foundations. This one in particular, I just think is a really great size and shape. You can see it's a flat top kabuki. It still has, longish, like a medium length bristle. And because of that, you've got this nice swirly motion. You can see how much the bristles bend. So you've got plenty of give there, and it just kind of smooths out the foundation very nicely. It's also incredibly soft, and for foundation brushes, I really prefer shorter handles because it gives me a little bit more control. And when you're spreading out like a thicker foundation or something, it can start getting a little streaky, and this doesn't really do that. So I find this really works well, and it's multi-purpose. It works with all of the foundations I have very well. My other favorite brush is the SUQQU T11. This one's actually undyed goat hair, which undyed goat hair you can use with cream products, but I do like to clean this off, regularly. I like to keep my brushes very clean. I know technically a lot of people recommend washing your brushes like once a month, cream products and so forth once a week. But I like to, I really don't want any spread of bacteria around my skin. I had acne problems when I was younger, and it's just always kind of been ingrained in me to keep everything that I'm using clean. So I like to use clean brushes every day. So I do typically clean these, except for like a few setting powder and stuff. I usually use a clean brush for most categories every day. So this one, you can see it's still short handled, but it's going to be longer than the Koyudo Fu-Pa. And you can see that this brush is going to not have quite the same movement. So it's a little bit stiffer. We've got shorter hair bristles, and these bristles kind of arc more like a rainbow here. So it's going to, we've got your shortest bristles right here, and then it tapers up, and it's actually a little flat here on the top. And I really like this for more liquidy foundations. If you're kind of like painting something on your face, essentially, I find this to be fantastic. So anything that's on the more liquidy side, I prefer this brush. I just think it gives a really nice thin coating of it. And when you're working with liquidy foundations, even if you're building them up, you should always work in thin layers, let it dry, add another thin layer, and so forth. I find this brush is great for that. So those are my 2 favorite foundation brushes. I have an honorable mention as well. So this one is from Koyudo, and I got this in my set with the Moisture Foundation, and they have just started selling this individually on their site as well, and it's called the Buffing Brush, and I have actually really been enjoying this. So it hasn't moved all the way up to status of favorite yet, but it's right down there, so right up there. So you can see it's slightly domed here, And this is synthetic. It's very soft, it's dense, and you can see swirling it around. It has kind of a density or stiffness in between that of the other two that I showed. And I find this works really well with everything also. So this, if you can't find the Koyudo Fu-Pa03, I think this is a good alternative also. So these are kind of my top 3 favorites. The other two I definitely consider a favorite. This would be, I guess, second place. Next up, we have concealer. Most of the time, I don't really conceal parts of my face except for the under eyes. And for that, I like this SUQQU concealer brush. This is Sable Hair, which is safe to use with cream and liquid products. You can see that it's going to be stiff, but it's soft. And I like to use this with concealer. Most of the time though, with concealers, I do use my fingers. So I find even when I use a brush, I always pat over it with my fingers as well, just to make sure that anything, that's kind of gathered in any lines or anything kind of just smooths out a little bit. So this is my favorite concealer brush, and I often will apply it with this and then tap over it with my fingers. For applying setting powder under my eyes, if I'm using the Pat McGrath Under Eye Blurring Powder, I actually like to use my finger for that one. So I will put a little powder on my finger and pat underneath. Otherwise, if I'm using a different powder, I will either use like a more pointed, highlighter brush, something like this one. This is the SUQQU highlight brush. And you can see that this one is kind of angled, so I'll use something like that underneath. Or what I use most often is this mini cheek brush from SUQQU, and I also use this for highlights. We'll come back to this one in a minute. For setting powder, if I'm doing just a light dusting of a powder, I like to have a soft, fluffy brush, and it doesn't have to be this one. This one happens to be my favorite. I just lost a hair there. But I like something that has a lot of give. It's very flexible, so you're looking for longer bristles, and I like something incredibly soft. This is the SUQQU F01. This one is Silver Fox Hairs. And I love this, but other ones that are similar to this, you're looking again at the shape for this. So you've got things like the Surat face brush. I also like the SUQQU Z1. I don't actually have that one, but that shape, that's what I'm looking for a setting powder. If, however, I'm setting it with a blurring powder and I really want to emphasize some of those blurring aspects, I always go for the SUQQU Master Face Brush, because this one is domed and it's dense. So you've got this nice soft buffing motion, and it'll give you like a little bit of buffing, but it's not going to be like a super firm buffer. I love this one. This is, if I had to pick one face brush overall, that would be this, because it can be used for anything, like literally anything. You can use it for setting powder, finishing powder. You could use it for blush and bronzer. If you're really careful, you could even just, put a little highlight here and kiss your cheeks with that. So this brush is really the most versatile face brush, and this would be my number 1 pick for a face brush. And when I am using like a blurring setting powder, I do like to have like a light buff. So I will use this brush for that. Now for blush, I love blush brushes. So blush brushes and eyeshadow brushes are my 2 favorite categories to look at and pick up. So I have a few here. First, I wanted to start off with an undyed option. This is an undyed goat hair brush. This is from the SUQQU Sky set. This is the classic cheek. And I love the shape of this. I personally really like these more dome shaped blush brushes. And since it is undyed, I can use this with cream products as well as powder products. So this definitely had to make it into my favorites, because anytime I use a cream blush, this is the brush that I reach for. So you can see that it's soft enough to give you like a lighter diffused look, but yet it's firm enough to move around cream products or anything that is not super, a blush that's buildable, one that's not super pigmented in your face right when you touch it. So this is my favorite blush brush overall as well. However, it's not the only one I reach for. If I'm using a blush that is very pigmented, For example, if I'm using something like the Wayne Goss Vivid Azalea, and it's a really bright brush, if I put this on, I would dab it on, but then, you know, buffing it out with this, I can do it, but I would prefer to use a brush that is a little bit looser and has a little bit more flexibility. My other favorite blush brush is this. This is the SUQQU KZ04. And you can see that this brush, it's got kind of like a flat top here. So it curves up, flattens, and then curves down. And I love this brush because you can see it's got a lot of flexibility and give. It's a little bit softer here, so you can still get like a buffy motion with it, but it's not going to be, you know, it's not a super strong buffer. So it will buff a little bit, and I think it works great with pigmented blushes. This one actually works great with any powder products. Now, this is made out of Kazan squirrel hairs, which are a rare type of brush hair to be used in makeup brushes, and they're incredibly soft. These are probably my softest brushes. I actually think they feel a little softer than the fox hair as well. So I love these. This one in particular is my favorite out of the ones I have so far, and you can only use this with powders. So for that reason, you definitely have to include something that can also be used with creams. So those are my two favorite blush brushes. But I also wanted to bring in the Sonia G Smooth Buffer, and I am putting this in a category of blush and face in general. So I also have the face one, which is the bigger version of this. And this would have made it into my favorites for buffing, for a face powder buffing brush, because it does such a great job. But I actually opted for the Smooth Buffer instead because of the versatility. You can go ahead and use this all over your face. It works great. I love using this with like meteorites or a buffing powder or a blurring powder or something like that as well to really kind of buff that in nicely. But this size in particular is fantastic for blush. And I've touched on this in a few videos, so I don't want to harp on it right now, but I absolutely love this. And you know, it's not really going in the blush category because you can use it all over, but I think this brush or something with this functionality is kind of a must-have in a brush collection because it really does kind of just blend everything out so beautifully. And this size in particular, I like because you can create like a really seamless transition between any contour, bronzer, or blush, or any other cheek products. You get this seamless transition with this, and it's small enough to be used for the cheeks, but large enough that it's not a pain if you want to use it all over your face. So love this. And this would be my pick for overall buffing brush. Now on to bronzers. I have two brushes here for this category because depending on which bronzer you're using, I prefer one or the other. For most bronzers, I actually prefer this brush. This is the Rephr 24 brush, and it's like always out of stock, but when you can find it, it's a really great brush to have. It's actually the little sister to the P22, which is this. This brush is one that's very popular with a lot of other people for bronzing. It's too big for me. I use it for face powder, but it's not a favorite brush of mine. This one, however, you know, it's the perfect size. So I really love to use this with bronzers. The only bronzer I don't really use this with is actually, I prefer to use this brush with the Gucci bronzer. So that one, I'm not even sure why it is, but it is a little bit more, like it's a little softer of a powder, and I just really like this brush with it. So this is the F04 from SUQQU. You can see it's the angled cheek brush. And it's just, it has a little bit more of a fluid motion compared to the 24 brush. You can see this one's gonna be a little bit stiffer and firmer. So for most bronzers, this is my pick. For the Gucci bronzer, I always go with this one, the F04. For highlight, I often go with two different styles of brushes. I either like a fan brush or something small like this. Traditional highlight brushes I will also use, but these are my two favorites. So this is the Rephr 20, which is a really loose, kind of fluffy fan brush, but you can see that it's not super thin. Some of the fan brushes I've had in the past that are like thin and wispy like this, they have very few actual hairs in there. So This one, you know, it's not like that, and it gives a really nice light dusting. So I like this. I also like the SUQQU Sculpt 3, but I prefer this one. And let me show you the Sculpt 3. Here's the Sculpt 3. So I do like both of these brushes for highlight, but this one, just the length of the bristles, and it's a little bit wispier. It's a little bit less dense because it has longer bristles. This one just, you know, it wins for me. The other brush I really gravitate to for highlight is the Mini Cheek from SUQQU. And this is just a really nice, versatile brush in general, but I do like to use this one for highlights. If it's a highlight that is not like super, super pigmented, then this is a great brush for it. Specifically, you know, like the Chanel Metal Peach highlight, that's one that's a little bit harder to get out of the pan. Something like this is good for that. You can see it's definitely gonna have a little bit more of a firm structure compared to the fan brush, yet it's still loose and soft that you're not gonna end up with like a stark line of highlight on your face. So I really love this. I find this versatile. Again, I also like this for powder under the eye, or if you're powdering like the T-zone or something, this works really well also. Next up for eyeshadow, I couldn't pick just like one eyeshadow brush, of course. So we've got a few brushes, but they are different categories of eyeshadow brushes. For a one and done eye look, if you're just using one shadow, or if you're using a base shadow, this is my favorite. This is the SUQQU KZ06. And typically I do not like eyeshadow brushes that are this size. So a lot of the SUQQU sets, they have like an eyeshadow brush that is similar to this. For example, this is the Fox series one, but this one I love. This one I like. So there's a difference. You can actually see that the KZ06 one is shorter bristles. It's also a little bit firmer. Sorry, this brush I actually use for powder, so you can see a little bit coming off of it. But this one here, you can see it's a little shorter. And it's not that it's necessarily denser, it might be, it's hard to tell, but because you have the shorter bristles, it is going to be a little bit firmer, and I just feel like it applies the shadow perfectly. And you also have to take a look at the shape. So again, we've got shorter bristles here, and then it kind of angles up, and there's not too much of a flat top, but there is a little bit of one. So it's kind of like an eyeshadow version of the KZ04 blush brush that I love. So I just find this great, and because of this, you know, flatter top here and the angle, you could also use this in the crease and everything. So it's really a great versatile eyeshadow brush, and this is my favorite for one and done shadows. Now for a crease brush, if I had just one crease brush, I would pick the SUQQU Blender Pro brush. It's a good medium-sized crease brush, and because it kind of tapers very nicely here at the top, you are able to kind of target your eyeshadow just in that crease, or you've got enough play here that you can really kind of blend it out and have a more blown out crease as well. So find this to be my most versatile and favorite crease brush. This one is dyed goat hair, so you can only use this with powder shadows. If I were using cream shadows, I would move on to the SUQQU Crease Pro. I don't love this one as much for powder shadows just because you can see it's a little bit more dense. It's also a little bit more pointed, so it's great for a targeted crease, but it's not as versatile for more of a blown out crease look either. So this one I love, but the Blender Pro comes in first. My favorite style of eyeshadow brush is actually the flat shader, and my number one favorite brush is this. This is the SUQQU Soft Shader from the Sky Set. I have a couple of these. I'd like to pick up more of them, but it's undyed goat hair, so I can use with cream or powders, and it's just the perfect size for me. I consider it a medium size, but a lot of people consider this a small brush size. And just for comparison here, we've got the Worker Pro, which I also really like, but this one is a little bit smaller and it has a little bit, you can see it's not as wide at the top. It has a steeper angle here. So I love this one, but it's not my favorite. Again, this one is. And then this here is the Builder Pro, which I also love, but it is going to be dyed goat hair. So this one is powder only. This one's also a little bit firmer. So I love this one for laying down something that you really don't want to blend out. So something that's maybe like a little bit more metallic, with some glitter or something that you really just want to place in a specific location. This one's great for that. Moving on to pencil brushes or anything for lining the eyes, I actually prefer these two. This is the Pencil 1 brush from Sonia G, and you can see that it does have a bit of a point, but it's going to be a soft point. It's firm enough that you can get a line on the thinner side, obviously not pencil thin, but it's also, you know, soft enough that you can kind of blur out that line as well. So this is my favorite pencil brush. And then my favorite smudger brush is this one from SUQQU. This is the eye blend brush. And it is a little bit thicker here, you can see, but it's, you know, it's got this nice little curve. It's dense, it's wide here. So it really blends out shadows well. This is synthetic, so you can use this with any product. I find it works well with everything. This is my go-to, you know, under eye brush at the moment. So I'm really enjoying this one. And then I just wanted to give an honorable mention to my go-to brushes. If I'm doing an all cream or liquid eyeshadow brush, I usually just gravitate towards these three because they do everything. So we have the SUQQU. This is the T8. These are all from the T or Takumi series. So the T8 is kind of like a crease-shaped brush, but you can see that it's pretty pointed. You can use this in the inner corner. You can also have like a thicker smudge line for shadow, and you obviously can use this in the crease as well. So I love this one. This is your flat shader style. This works great with all cream products. This is the T7. I really do like this one. And then this here is the T12, which is great for lining the eyes. This is another liner brush that I really love in general for all products as well. Now, these are all undyed goat hair. They are made specifically with the idea of being able to use them for creams, liquids, and powders. So I can use them for everything, but when I know I'm doing like a face all with like creams or liquids, I always make sure I set these aside to use these because they just work so well with it and I don't have to like hunt around for a brush. And last up, we have lip brushes. I don't use lip brushes a ton, but when I want to be precise with my lipstick, I always use this brush. This is from Wayne Goss. It's a 07 brush. You can also use this for eyeliner, which I do sometimes. But you can see here that, you know, it's kind of got this flat top. They're really short bristles, so they're stiff. It's soft, but it just makes it perfect for lining your lips. And yeah, I really love this. So not only for lips, but I also like it for eyeliner, but this is definitely my #1 lip brush. So if I had to narrow it down and just get one brush for each category overall, my most versatile, and this kind of surprised me a little bit. I knew they were going to be mostly Sonia G, but actually they are all part of the Sky series from Sonia G, which, you know, was a little surprising. If I had to pick one powder brush, it would be this. This is the Master Face Brush. Again, it can be used for lighter powders. It can also be used for buffing. You know, it just works well with everything. And again, you could even use this for blush or contour or bronzer or anything as well. So this is my most versatile face brush. The mini cheek, I think, is fantastic for under the eye highlight or T-zone area. So this is another most versatile brush. Blush brush, I had to go with a classic cheek because again, it can be used for creams and powders and it just has a really versatile shape for me. So that's my most versatile blush. And then for eyeshadow, I went with the soft shader because again, if I really wanted to, I could do this in the crease. It's pointy enough, you know, if I angle and use the side edge here, I can do inner corner, I could line, I can lay down color. It's just the perfect eyeshadow brush for me. And then the smooth buffer for buffing. It's my overall favorite buffing brush, but I did want to show you a synthetic comparison. This is the SUQQU Buff and Blur brush. And if you are looking for a synthetic version, this Buff and Blur brush is bigger. It's a little bit smaller than the Face One brush, but I find this brush is great. You can actually use this for foundation as well. It works great for foundation. I use this. It's actually pretty comparable to the Westman Atelier brush. So you can see that they're almost the same size aside from the handles. This is way more expensive than the Chantecaille. They're both synthetic, and you know, this works great for powders and creams. So if you're looking for a synthetic buffing option, this is a great one. And you know, it's a little bit larger than the smooth buffer, so you know, it's not necessarily quite as ideal for blush, but it can be done, and it's great for overall products. Usually I use this more for all over face powder or foundation though. That sums up all of my favorite brushes in each category. I have to say, I thought this was gonna be like a 10-minute video, but of course I couldn't stop talking, so hopefully it wasn't too long, and I hope this was helpful. And again, this is gonna be part of a brush series, so make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you know when the next video will be up. But if you have any suggestions or recommendations, if there's anything you'd really like to see, please make sure you share that with me. I do have a list from, you know, suggestions that people have already made in the past, which is why we decided to make this in a series. So if you like this video, please make sure you hit that thumbs up button. That really does help me a lot. And like, comment, and share. So thank you so much and have a great day. I will see you very soon.